The harsh cry of a crow shattered the dawn silence. As Wyatt Rogan spotted something unusual on the horizon, a huddled figure collapsed beside the winding dirt trail leading to his ranch. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for anyone to be alone, especially not on the outskirts of Copper Canyon, where his modest spread lay nestled between rugged hills and stretches of unforgiving desert. Wyatt tugged the reins of his chestnut mare, slowing her pace as he approached cautiously. These days, a man couldn't be too careful with the increase of bandits and troublemakers passing through. His hand hovered near the Colt .45 at his hip as he drew closer, squinting against the rising sun. "Hello there," he called, keeping a safe distance. "You all right?" The figure stirred, revealing a woman with dirt-streaked features and torn clothing. Her eyes, when they met his, were a striking hazel that reflected both fear and defiance despite her obvious exhaustion. "I don't need charity," she managed, though her cracked lips and hoarse voice betrayed her desperate state. Wyatt dismounted, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The woman couldn't have been more than 25, with auburn hair that might have been beautiful if not matted with dust and sweat. Her dress, once fine by the looks of the fabric, was tattered beyond repair. "Name's Wyatt Rogan," he said, removing his hat. "My ranch is just over that rise. I reckon you could use some water and a proper meal at the very least." She struggled to sit up straighter, pride evident in the lift of her chin. "Prudence Ellis. And I told you," I don't need her words cut off as she swayed, clearly lightheaded. Wyatt moved forward quickly, catching her before she collapsed again. "Mrs. Ellis, miss," she corrected, her eyes flashing. "Though I suspect that's part of my current predicament." Wyatt helped her to a more comfortable position, offering his canteen. "Well, Miss Ellis, I'm not one to pry into others' business, but I can't in good conscience leave a person to die of thirst and exposure. Whatever brought you here is your affair." Prudence accepted the water with trembling hands, taking small, careful sips as she'd clearly gone without for some time. When she'd finished, she handed back the canteen with reluctant gratitude. "I was employed as a governess for the Harrington family in Tucson," she explained, her voice strengthening. "Mr. Harrington made improper advances. When I refused him, he accused me of stealing Mrs. Harrington's brooch. They threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back and a warning that I'd hang if I showed my face in town again." Wyatt's jaw tightened. He'd heard similar stories before, wealthy men taking advantage of women in service positions, then discarding them when they resisted. The frontier justice system rarely favored a woman's word over a prominent businessman's. "That's about 3 days' walk from here," he observed. "You've come a long way." "I had nowhere else to go," she said simply. "I thought perhaps Silver Springs might offer employment opportunities." Wyatt shook his head. "Silver Springs is another 2 days on foot, and they're no kinder to women without references." He paused, considering. "My ranch needs help. I lost my housekeeper to consumption last winter and the place shows it. I could offer you room and board, plus a small wage until you decide what's next." Suspicion clouded her features. "And what would you expect in return, Mr. Rogan?" He understood her wariness. "Cooking, cleaning, mending, nothing more than housekeeping duties." "I've got a separate cabin for you to stay in. My sister used it before she married and moved to California." Prudence studied him, searching for deceit. Finding none, her shoulders slumped slightly. "I have no money, no possessions, not even a change of clothes," she admitted. "I can't pay you for anything until I earn it." Wyatt extended his hand to help her up. "You'll have everything you need. That's a promise." She hesitated only briefly before accepting his hand, her skin warm despite her weakened state. As he helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her to ensure she wouldn't fall during the short ride to his ranch, Wyatt felt an unexpected sense of rightness that he quickly dismissed as simple human decency. The Rogan ranch came into view as they crested the final hill, a modest main house with a sturdy barn, corral, and several outbuildings including the small cabin he'd mentioned. It wasn't grand by any means, but it was well maintained and productive, supporting a respectable herd of cattle and horses. "It's not much," Wyatt said as they approached, "but it's honest land." Prudence straightened, taking in the property with appraising eyes. "It looks well cared for." "Try telling that to the inside of the house," he replied with a self-deprecating chuckle. "Bachelor living doesn't lend itself to tidiness." He helped her dismount when they reached the yard, steadying her when she swayed on her feet. Up close, the exhaustion etched into her face was even more apparent. "Let's get you settled in the cabin first," he decided. "Rest should come before work." The cabin was simple but clean, with a bed, table, chair, and small stove. Wyatt lit a fire to take the chill off the morning air while Prudence stood in the doorway, seemingly overwhelmed by the sudden turn in her fortune. "I'll bring you some fresh clothing," he said. "My sister left some things behind that might fit you well enough until we can get to town for proper supplies." "Mr. Rogan," Prudence said softly, "I appreciate your kindness, but I want to be clear I plan to work for my keep. I won't be indebted to anyone." Wyatt nodded, respecting her determination. "Fair enough. Rest today, start tomorrow. I'll have food sent over shortly." He left her to settle in, heading to the main house to inform his ranch hand, Eduardo, about their new arrival and to retrieve some of his sister's old clothing. As he rummaged through the chest in the spare room, he wondered what had possessed him to offer shelter to a complete stranger. It wasn't like him to act impulsively, yet something about Prudence Ellis's dignified suffering had stirred a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed. By evening, Prudence had bathed using the water Eduardo's wife, Maria, had heated for her. The borrowed dress was slightly large but clean and whole, and Maria had helped brush and braid her auburn hair. Some color had returned to her cheeks after several small meals throughout the day, though she still moved with careful, deliberate motions. A knock at the cabin door revealed Wyatt, hat in hand. "Thought I'd check how you're settling in," he said, remaining respectfully on the threshold. Prudence invited him in with a gesture. "Your friends have been very kind. I'm feeling much improved." "Maria has that effect on people," Wyatt smiled. "She and Eduardo have been with me since I established this place 5 years ago, their family more than employees." "You're fortunate to have such loyal help," she observed, settling into the chair while Wyatt leaned against the doorframe. "We look after each other out here," he replied. "That's how folks survive in these parts." Prudence studied him with those perceptive hazel eyes. "Why did you stop for me today, Mr. Rogan? Most men would have ridden past." The question caught him off guard with its directness. "I suppose, because my mother raised me better than that," he answered honestly. "She always said a person's character is revealed by how they treat those who can offer nothing in return. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Wyatt acknowledged with a sad smile. "Lost her and my pa to a fever when I was 19, been making my own way since." An understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared loss, of lives altered by circumstances beyond control. "I should let you rest," Wyatt said finally. "If you're feeling up to it tomorrow, Maria can show you around the house, get you familiar with how things run here." "I'll be ready at dawn," Prudence assured him, a hint of her stubborn pride returning. Wyatt tipped his hat and left her to her rest, oddly unsettled by their brief conversation. There was something about Prudence Ellis that intrigued him, a strength that adversity had failed to break. The following weeks established a new rhythm on the Rogan ranch. True to her word, Prudence proved herself an exceptionally hard worker, bringing order to Wyatt's bachelor household with efficient determination. The main house transformed under her attention, floors scrubbed, furniture polished, curtains washed and mended, meals prepared with skill despite limited supplies. May turned to June, and as Prudence regained her strength, she expanded her duties, establishing a vegetable garden beside the house and even helping with lighter ranch tasks when needed. Her initial reserve gradually softened, though she maintained a certain formality that Wyatt found both frustrating and admirable. One evening, as summer heat lingered past sunset, Wyatt returned from checking the northern pasture to find Prudence sitting on the porch steps, watching the crimson sky fade to purple. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, removing his dusty hat. She nodded, moving slightly to make room. "It's beautiful here at this hour," she observed. In Tucson, the buildings blocked much of the horizon. Wyatt settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "That's why I chose this land. The open sky reminds a person of their proper place in the world." They sat in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared. Prudence had changed in the weeks since her arrival. Her face had filled out. Her skin had taken on a healthy glow from working outdoors, and her auburn hair, when not strictly pinned up, caught the light like burnished copper. "I received a letter from town today," she said suddenly. "The mercantile owner's wife needs an assistant. She's offered me a position starting next month." Wyatt felt an unexpected hollowness in his chest at her words. "I see, that's good news, I suppose." "It would mean proper wages, a room above the store," she continued, not looking at him. "A chance to save money, perhaps eventually move somewhere with more opportunities." "You do well anywhere you choose," Wyatt said truthfully. "You've certainly brought this place to life." Prudence turned to him then, her expression unreadable in the deepening twilight. "Have I?" Something in her tone made his heart beat faster. "The ranch hasn't run this smoothly since my mother was alive," he admitted, "and it's not just the cooking or cleaning. It's—" He hesitated, struggling to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. "It's what, Mr. Rogan?" she prompted softly. "Wyatt," he corrected. "After all this time, I think you might call me Wyatt." A small smile touched her lips. "Wyatt, then." "It's the way you've made this place a home again," he finally managed. "I didn't realize how much I'd missed that feeling until you brought it back." The confession hung between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Prudence looked down at her hands, folded neatly in her lap. "I should accept Mrs. Hollister's offer," she said, but without conviction. "It would be the sensible choice." Wyatt gathered his courage. "And if I asked you to stay, not as my housekeeper, but—" When he didn't continue, she looked up questioningly. "But—" "I'm not a man of fancy words, Prudence, but these past weeks, watching you rebuild your life with such grace and determination, I've come to admire you more than any person I've ever known." Color rose in her cheeks, visible even in the fading light. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he countered gently. "I know you're strong and proud and kind, even when the world's given you reason to be none of those things. I know you sing to yourself when you think no one's listening, and you leave wildflowers on the breakfast table because beautiful things matter, even on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere." Prudence's expression softened with surprise. "I didn't think you noticed such things." "I notice everything about you," Wyatt confessed. "And I'm asking you to consider a future here with me not as an employee but as a partner, in all things." The weight of his proposal settled between them. Prudence stood, wrapping her arms around herself as if suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "You're offering this out of kindness," she said, her voice tight with emotion, "because you found me with nothing and you think I still have nothing to offer elsewhere." Wyatt rose to face her. "That's not true. I'm offering because I've fallen in love with you, Prudence Ellis, and if you don't feel the same, I'll help you get settled in town with Mrs. Hollister and wish you well. But I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't miss you every day." Her eyes glistened in the starlight. "I've been dependent on others' charity my entire life, first as an orphan, then as a governess, now here. How do I know my feelings aren't just gratitude or fear of starting over again?" "I don't have that answer," Wyatt said honestly. "All I know is that what's between us feels real to me, more real than anything I've known before." Prudence took a deep breath. "I need time to think. This isn't a decision I can make lightly." "Take all the time you need," he agreed, though it cost him to say it. "Nothing needs to change until you're certain, one way or the other." She nodded gratefully and slipped past him into the house, leaving Wyatt alone with the stars and his hopes. The following days brought a palpable tension to the ranch. Wyatt kept his distance. giving Prudence the space she'd requested, though every glimpse of her sent his heart racing like a green boy's. They maintained their routines with careful politeness, but the easy companionship they'd developed had been replaced by an awareness that crackled between them like heat lightning. A week after his proposal, disaster struck. Wyatt and Eduardo were moving cattle to the lower pasture when a summer storm blew in with unexpected ferocity. They were racing to get the herd to shelter when lightning spooked the animals, triggering a panic. In the chaos, Wyatt's horse stumbled, throwing him directly into the path of the stampeding cattle. He remembered little after that fragments of pain, Eduardo's frantic shouting, rain on his face as he drifted in and out of consciousness. When he fully awoke, he was in his own bed, bandaged and aching, with Prudence asleep in a chair beside him, her hand resting near his on the quilt. "Prudence," he murmured, his throat parched. She startled awake, relief flooding her features. "Wyatt, thank God. You've been unconscious since yesterday." She helped him drink some water, her hands gentle but efficient. "Eduardo brought you home. You have 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and more bruises than I can count, but the doctor says you're lucky to be alive." "The herd?" he asked, wincing as he tried to sit up. "Don't move," she commanded. Eduardo and the men managed to recover most of them. "Stop worrying about the cattle and focus on healing." There was a new authority in her voice, a certainty that hadn't been there before. Wyatt subsided against the pillows, studying her face. Dark circles beneath her eyes suggested she'd been at his bedside throughout the night. "You stayed," he observed. "Of course I stayed," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Someone had to make sure you kept breathing." A wave of tenderness washed over him. "Prudence, about what I said, not now," she interrupted, adjusting his blankets. "You need rest, not conversation." But her hand lingered on his, and in that touch, Wyatt found hope. His recovery was slow and frustrating. Used to physical labor from dawn to dusk, being confined to bed nearly drove Wyatt to distraction. Prudence managed his restlessness with a blend of firmness and compassion, reading to him in the evenings, helping him with correspondence regarding ranch business, and gradually assisting him with short walks as his strength returned. Their relationship evolved during those weeks of forced proximity. The awkwardness that had followed his proposal dissolved into a deeper understanding. Prudence shared stories of her childhood in an Indianapolis orphanage, her determination to educate herself, her dreams of someday having a place to truly belong. Wyatt spoke of his parents, the early struggles establishing the ranch, his hopes for its future. By August, when Wyatt was finally well enough to resume light duties, something fundamental had shifted between them. They moved around each other with an easy familiarity, anticipating needs, sharing smiles over private jokes, their hands occasionally brushing in gestures that seemed accidental but weren't. On a golden late summer evening, Wyatt found Prudence in the garden, harvesting tomatoes in the slanting sunlight. She looked up at his approach, pushing a strand of hair from her face with the back of her wrist. "Eduardo says the new calf is doing well," she greeted him. "That makes 3 this month." "The ranch is thriving," Wyatt agreed, taking the basket from her and offering his arm for the walk back to the house. "Thanks in no small part to your management while I was laid up." Prudence accepted his arm, a gesture that had become comfortable between them. "I enjoyed it, actually. There's satisfaction in seeing immediate results from your decisions." "You have a good head for business," he observed. "Better than mine in some ways." They walked in companionable silence until reaching the porch, where Prudence paused rather than entering the house. "Mrs. Hollister sent another letter," she said. "She's still holding the position for me but needs an answer by month's end." Wyatt set down the basket, his heart suddenly pounding. "And have you decided?" Prudence turned to face him, her expression resolute. "I have." "Before you tell me," Wyatt said quickly, "I want you to know something. When I found you on that trail, I made you a promise that you'd have everything you need. I meant it then as basic necessities: food, shelter, clothing. but I understand now that what people truly need goes far beyond that. He took her hands in his. You need respect and independence. You need to know your voice matters. You need the freedom to build a life that's truly yours. He paused, gathering his courage. If you choose to go to town, I'll support that decision. But if you stay, it would be as my equal in every way, my partner in this ranch, in life, in all the years to come. Tears welled in Prudence's eyes. When Mr. Harrington threw me out, he told me I was worthless, that no decent man would ever want me once he'd spread rumors about my character. I believed him. Even when you found me, even when you brought me here, some part of me kept waiting for the moment you'd show your true intentions. Wyatt squeezed her hands gently. And did I? Yes, she whispered, but not in the way I feared. Your true intention was simply kindness and later, love without expectation or condition. She took a shaky breath. I wrote to Mrs. Hollister yesterday declining her offer. Hope bloomed in Wyatt's chest. You're staying? Prudence nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. I'm staying. Because I've fallen in love with this land almost as much as I've fallen in love with its owner. Wyatt pulled her into his arms, his heart so full he could barely speak. When he found his voice, he asked, Will you marry me, Prudence Ellis? Make this ranch our home together. Yes, she answered without hesitation, though I have one condition. He drew back slightly to see her face. Name it. That we always remember there are others out there like I was, people who have been cast out with nothing, that we help them when we can the way you helped me. Wyatt brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. We'll make it part of our wedding vows. Their marriage took place 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the meadow behind the ranch house with Eduardo and Maria as witnesses. Prudence wore a new blue dress purchased from the town mercantile, with wildflowers in her hair. Wyatt, still moving carefully due to his healing ribs, couldn't take his eyes off her as they exchanged vows beneath the vast Arizona sky. That evening, after a celebration with neighboring ranchers and townsfolk who'd come to respect the hard-working couple, Wyatt and Prudence stood on the porch of what was now truly their home. Happy, Mrs. Rogan? Wyatt asked, his arm around her waist. Happier than I ever imagined possible, she replied, leaning into his embrace. When you found me on that trail, I had nothing, not even hope. And now, Prudence turned in his arms to face him. Now I have everything I need. Their story spread through the territory over the years that followed how Wyatt and Prudence Rogan built one of the most successful ranches in Arizona, how they established a fund to help women escaping desperate circumstances, how their home became known as a place where second chances were possible. By 1885, the Rogan Ranch had expanded to include a school for local children, taught by Prudence 3 days a week. Their own daughter, 7-year-old Catherine, with her father's quiet determination and her mother's quick intelligence, was already showing signs of being a natural horsewoman and a fierce defender of those in need. On their 10th anniversary, Wyatt presented Prudence with the deed to a new property adjacent to their ranch land he'd purchased specifically to establish a proper refuge for women needing a safe place to rebuild their lives. You once told me your dream was to create a place where people truly belong, he reminded her as they stood overlooking the site where construction would soon begin. This is your legacy, Prudence. Our legacy, she corrected, watching their son James, now 5, chasing butterflies in the meadow below while Catherine practiced roping techniques Eduardo had taught her. Everything we've built has been together. Wyatt pulled her close, marveling at how the frightened woman he'd found collapsed by the trail had transformed into this confident, purposeful person who'd changed not just his life, but countless others. When I told you you'd have everything you need, he said softly, I never imagined how much you'd give in return. Prudence smiled up at him, the years having only deepened her beauty in his eyes. That's the secret, isn't it? Real love isn't just about what we receive, it's about what we create together. As the sun set over their expanding horizon, casting long shadows across the land they'd nurtured through drought and plenty, hardship and joy, Wyatt and Prudence stood united, two people who'd found in each other not just what they needed, but everything they'd never dared to dream possible. The refuge they built eventually became a landmark in the territory, a testament to the power of second chances and the difference two determined people could make. And though the frontier gradually gave way to civilization as Arizona moved toward statehood, the story of the cowboy who found a woman cast out with nothing and promised her everything she needed became the stuff of local legend, a reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, love could take root and flourish against all odds.